The salt-laced wind of New Avalon whipped around the corners of the Starling Museum of Light, a promise of the cold Atlantic just blocks away. It felt a world away from my cramped apartment, from the life where rent was a monthly monster and dreams were filed under someday. Tonight, I was an imposter. My name is Lila Hart, I'm 24, and my official title is Temporary Assistant to a Junior Donor Liaison, which is a fancy way of saying I run errands for a man who runs errands for someone important. Tonight's errand was the big one. Deliver a bid portfolio for the Kestrel Wharf tender. A simple drop-off. My boss, Mr. Dawes, had said, in and out. He'd failed to mention the inn was through the front doors of the city's most exclusive gala. The dress was my first mistake, borrowed from a high-end thrift store called Second Chances. It was a deep sapphire blue that probably had a glamorous life before it met me. It had also been made for a woman 2 inches shorter. I'd spent last night hunched over, a needle and thread in my trembling hand, stitching a new hem. Under the museum's unforgiving lights, I could see every uneven stitch, a tiny, jagged testament to my fraudulence. I saw the women from the Aurora Foundation's PR team see it, too. Their eyes, sharp as stilettos, flicked down to my ankles and then back to each other. A whisper, like the rustle of dry leaves, passed between them. The word trash caught in the air and stung my ears. I clutched the leather portfolio case to my chest. It was the only thing about me that felt real, that belonged. Inside was the reason I was here. The reason Mr. Dawes had looked so pale when he handed it to me. Don't let this out of your sight, Lila. Not for a second. The Starling Museum was designed to intimidate. It was a cathedral of glass and light, where every surface was a mirror. I saw 100 versions of myself, a scared girl in a borrowed dress, her knuckles white around a leather case, her carefully pinned hair already losing its fight with the humidity. The reflections multiplied the crowd, turning a few dozen of New Avalon's elite into a judging army. Their laughter was brittle, a sound that didn't reach their eyes. Above it all, the mournful cry of a string quartet sawed at the air, trying to stitch a layer of elegance over the raw ambition humming in the room. I just needed to find the drop-off point, a designated courier table in the main hall, but I didn't even make it past the lobby. A man with a severe haircut and an earpiece stepped into my path, his body a solid wall of bespoke wool. His name tag read Henri, head of guest relations. "May I help you?" he asked, his voice slick with condescension. "I'm here to deliver a portfolio for the Aurora Foundation," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady, "for the Kestrel Wharf bid." He didn't even glance at my invitation. His eyes did another slow, insulting crawl from my poorly hemmed dress to my hopeful face. "The staff and courier entrance is around the back, through the service alley." My stomach clenched. My instructions were to bring it to the main hall. "Instructions change," he said with a dismissive wave. "This is a private event." The implication was clear. I was not one of them. I was service. The moment hung in the air, thick and suffocating, and then I saw them, the phones. Several guests, bored with their champagne and canapes, had turned their devices on me. A woman with diamonds dripping from her ears was already filming, a smirk playing on her lips. A hashtag was probably being born right at that moment. Something witty and cruel at my expense. Gala crasher? Rags no riches? Trash. Heat flooded my cheeks. Humiliation was a physical thing, a hot tide rising from my chest to my hairline. I had two choices: make a scene and get thrown out, or swallow my pride and find the service alley. Pride didn't pay the rent. I took a step back, murmuring an apology that died in my throat. As I turned, a wall of men in dark suits pushed through the entrance, moving with the coordinated grace of a wolf pack. They smelled of expensive cologne and cold ambition, the Verdigris Union. Someone next to me whispered, the Port Workers Alliance. I knew from Mr. Dawes' frantic briefings that they were more than that, a syndicate with its hands deep in the city's shipping lanes. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a scar bisecting his eyebrow, jostled past me without a glance. His elbow caught the portfolio. It tumbled from my grasp, hitting the polished marble floor with a sickening slap. The latch sprang open. Papers fanned out in a messy arc. For a heart-stopping second, the whole world went silent. All I could see were the documents, exposed under the brilliant lights, the waterway traffic maps, their intricate blue lines detailing every current and channel into the harbor. And the other one, the one that had made Mr. Dawes sweat a leaked internal memo from the Port Sovereignty Commission, its official seal stark against the white paper. My mission wasn't just to deliver a bid, it was to deliver leverage. I dropped to my knees, scrambling to gather the pages, my hands shaking so badly I could barely pick them up. The men from the union paused, their eyes lingering on the seal of the commission memo. The man with the scar looked down at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Before his leader, a severe-looking man with silver hair, nudged him forward. They moved on, swallowed by the crowd. My breath was coming in ragged little gasps. I shoved the papers back into the case, fumbling with the latch. Get a grip. Lila, just get a grip. From above, on the sweeping glass balcony that overlooked the lobby, a man watched. I felt his gaze before I saw him, a weight, a pressure on the back of my neck. He was tall, dressed in a black tuxedo that seemed cut from the shadows themselves. Even from this distance, I could see the dark glint of pearl cufflinks at his wrists. He stood perfectly still, a predator observing its territory, his face an unreadable mask of calm. A new whisper snaked through the room, different from the one that had mocked me. It was laced with fear and a strange, electric excitement. It's Vale, Cashin Vale. What's he doing here? Vale is here. There'll be trouble tonight. The name meant nothing to me. I was a temp, a nobody. My world was the bus schedule and the price of coffee, the power brokers of the glass quarter, the city's financial and criminal heart, were just ghosts in newspaper headlines. Henri, the head of guest relations, appeared at my side, now accompanied by the event manager, a woman whose smile was as thin and sharp as a shard of glass. This has gone on long enough, the woman said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet lobby. Cheap things don't belong here. Please escort yourself out. The laughter started then, not the polite, brittle chuckles from before, but open, barking laughter. It washed over me, a wave of sound and scorn. My entire body felt like it was on fire. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to curl up and die. But then I thought of my sister, June, working a double shift at the Harbor Line Clinic to make her own ends meet. I thought of the stack of bills on our kitchen table. I stood up, clutching the portfolio to my chest like a shield. My chin came up. I would not let them break me. And then he moved. The man from the balcony, Cassian Vale, descended the grand staircase. He didn't rush, but every step was deliberate, purposeful. The crowd didn't just part for him. It seemed to dissolve in his path, people melting back as if his presence alone took up all the oxygen. The laughter faltered, then died completely, strangled in the throats of the very people who had been so entertained moments before. He stopped directly in front of me, and he was taller up close, his shoulders broad enough to block out the rest of the room. His eyes were the color of a stormy sea, and they weren't looking at the crowd or the smirking event manager. They were looking at me. Without a word, he shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket. The fabric was heavy, expensive silk. He draped it over my shoulders. It was still warm from his body, and it settled over me like a cloak of protection. The scent of cedar wood and something clean, like rain on asphalt, enveloped me. It was the safest I had felt all night. My heart, which had been hammering in my throat, changed its rhythm. It was now a frantic, syncopated beat, like a snare drum in a smoky jazz club. Cashin Vale finally turned his gaze from me to Henry and the event manager. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the silence of the vast lobby like a razor. "She's here with me." The phones, which had been pointed at me in my shame, now swung toward him, toward us. The woman with the diamonds looked stunned. This was a story far better than a poor girl in a bad dress. This was Cassian Vale, a man who rarely appeared in public, personally intervening. "Henri," Vale said, his voice still dangerously soft, "you will apologize to my guest. In writing. I expect a copy delivered to my office by 9 a.m. I trust the museum's legal department can facilitate that." Henri's face went white. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He simply nodded. A jerky, puppet-like motion. The event manager looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. I stood frozen, the heavy silk of his jacket a strange weight on my shoulders. I was trembling, a new kind of tremor that had nothing to do with humiliation and everything to do with a terrifying, bewildering sense of whiplash. What did he want? Why me? He leaned in, his mouth close to my ear. His breath was warm. "Hold on to that bag," he murmured, his voice so low only I could hear it. "A lot of people want what's inside." His eyes, those stormy gray eyes, flickered past me for a fraction of a second, landing on the silver-haired man from the Verdigris Union, Silas Keir. Keir met his gaze across the room, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly. A silent declaration of war had just passed between them, and I was somehow standing on the battle line. Suddenly, from a side hall came a sharp, explosive pop, followed by the sound of shattering glass, a crystal chandelier, or maybe a light fixture. People gasped, a diversion, a disturbance. Cassian didn't even flinch. He gave a tiny, almost invisible tilt of his head. From the shadows near the staircase, another man, built like a brick wall with the watchful eyes of a hawk, detached himself and moved silently toward the sound. His bodyguard, Jax Quell. I would later learn. The world had tilted on its axis. An hour ago, my biggest problem was a crooked hem. Now, I was wrapped in a Mafia boss's jacket, holding a portfolio everyone seemed willing to fight for, and the night was just beginning. His hand, surprisingly gentle, landed on the small of my back. It wasn't a push, but a firm, undeniable guidance. "This way," was all he said. His voice a low command meant only for me. He steered me away from the gawking crowd and the mess of broken glass, toward a darkened corridor I hadn't noticed before. The heavy tuxedo jacket felt like a shield, cocooning me in its scent of cedar and rain, a stark contrast to the cloying perfumes of the Gala. We entered a room that was the complete opposite of the blindingly bright lobby. It was a cavern of shifting shadows, an art exhibit titled Ephemeral Fields. Large panels of light pulsed and faded in slow, hypnotic rhythms, casting long, distorted silhouettes across the floor. One moment, a wall would glow with the soft light of dawn. The next, it would plunge into absolute black. It was beautiful, disorienting, and the perfect place to hide. The shifting light made it impossible for anyone to get a clear view of us, and the low, ambient hum of the installation swallowed our words. Cassian led me to the center of the room, stopping between two panels that were currently dark. The only light came from a sliver of pulsing blue 30 feet away. I could see the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes that seemed to absorb what little light there was. "I don't understand," I began, my voice still shaky. I shrugged the jacket, intending to hand it back to him. It felt too intimate, too much like a debt. "Thank you for that, but I should go. I just need to deliver this." He ignored my attempt to return the jacket, his gaze fixed on the leather portfolio still clutched in my hands. "Let me see it." It wasn't a request. I hesitated for a second, Mr. Dawes's panicked face flashing in my mind. Then I remembered the whispers, the laughter, and the cold, hard fact that this man, Cassian Vale, was the only reason I hadn't been thrown into a service alley. I opened the latch and handed it to him. He took it, his movements economical and precise. A nearby panel glowed to life, illuminating his face in a pale white light. His expression was focused, his eyes scanning the documents with an unnerving speed. He wasn't reading them so much as consuming them. When he got to the Port Sovereignty Commission memo, he paused. He tilted the paper, his thumb brushing over the official seal at the bottom. "This is good work," he said, his voice a low murmur. "The watermark is almost perfect, a heliotrope 7 printer, most likely. The ink saturation is off by less than a micron, a forgery, but one only an expert would spot." He looked up at me, his eyes pinning me in place. "Where did you get this?" "I'm just a courier," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "My boss is Mr. Dawes at the Aurora Foundation. He told me to bring it here. He said the memo proves the Tri-County Anti-Organized Crime Directorate is being mismanaged, their budget rerouted by corrupt officials." A ghost of a smile, cold and without humor, touched his lips. "The TAOCD is a ghost agency. It exists only on paper. A boogeyman the city council uses to secure federal funding. Silas Keir, the man you saw from the Verdigris Union, has been using it as a front for years. He controls the shell corporation that receives the funds." He handed the portfolio back to me. "This memo isn't meant to expose corruption. It's meant to legitimize the TAOCD's authority to seize control of the Kestrel Wharf tender under a false, ongoing investigation clause. It's a power grab, and you just walked it through the front door for them." My blood ran cold. I wasn't a courier. I was a pawn, a delivery girl for a forged document designed to help a syndicate seize a piece of the city. I felt sick. "I need your jacket," I said, my voice suddenly firm. I couldn't be indebted to this man. I couldn't be a part of his world. He looked at me, a flicker of something amusement curiosity in his stormy eyes. "Why?" "Because I don't want to owe you anything." "A debt is only a debt," he replied, his voice dropping even lower. "If the other person intends to collect—" Before I could process the chilling implication of his words, a small, ruby-red dot of light appeared on the wall behind him. It danced across a framed piece of abstract art, a pinpoint of lethal intensity in the gloom. My mind took a second to catch up, a laser sight. The room was plunged into darkness as the light panel died. In that same instant, a hand clamped around my arm and I was yanked sideways with incredible force. It was Jax, the bodyguard, who had seemingly materialized out of the shadows. He pulled both me and Cassian behind a thick, freestanding wall that housed one of the light installations. A split second later, the power in the room flickered violently. The low hum of the exhibit stuttered and died, leaving us in near total silence and darkness, punctuated by the faint, panicked shouts from the distant lobby. Cassian's phone vibrated, its screen casting a ghostly pale light on his face. He read the text, his expression hardening into granite. He didn't need to say anything. I could feel the shift in the air, the temperature dropping a few degrees. "Ada says Silas changed the plan," he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than calm control in his eyes. It looked like anger. "The target isn't me. It's the girl." "The girl? Me?" My breath hitched in my chest. "A sniper. They had a sniper aiming for me." "Who knew you had this bag?" he demanded, his voice sharp, stripping away any pretense of politeness. "Who knew you were the one bringing it?" "No one," I stammered, my mind racing. "Just Mr. Dawes. He gave it to me right before I left the office. No one else was there." A seed of doubt, cold and ugly, began to sprout in my mind. Dawes's pale face, his sweaty hands, his insistence that I not let the bag out of my sight. He hadn't been worried about the bid. He'd been worried about his pawn. Cassian seemed to read my thoughts. He glanced at Jax. "Get Ada to lock down all service elevators and access points to this wing. Now." Jax nodded and melted back into the shadows. "My sister," I blurted out, the thought hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "My God, June." My voice cracked. This was no longer just about me. "She's working a night shift at the Harbor Line Clinic. If they know about me, do they know about her?" The fear for myself was a cold knot in my stomach. The fear for June was a raging inferno. She was innocent. She had nothing to do with any of this. Cassian pulled out his phone again, his thumb moving quickly. "Finch," he said into the device. "I need a location and welfare check. June Hart works at the Harborline Clinic, and I need a security sweep of her residence. Now." He listened for a moment. "I don't care what you're in the middle of. Do it." He hung up. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He didn't say, "I'm sure she's fine." He acted. The efficiency was terrifying and, in a strange way, comforting. Less than a minute later, his phone buzzed again. He put it on speaker. "Boss!" A young, energetic voice crackled through the phone. It was Finch. "There's a problem. Local security cameras covering the street and alleyway behind her apartment building just went offline 5 minutes ago. Not a power failure. Looks like someone borrowed the access credentials from the service provider. She's blind." The room tilted. They were already there. They were watching her home. I swayed, and a steadying hand on my elbow was the only thing that kept me from collapsing. Cassian's. As if summoned by the rising tension, a figure emerged from the far end of the darkened room. Silas Keir. He stepped into a sliver of emergency lighting from the corridor, looking perfectly unruffled. He took off his hat in a gesture of mock politeness. "Vale," he said, his voice smooth as polished river stone. "A bit of a commotion tonight. Unfortunate. Give me the girl and the seal. I'll give you back your peaceful evening." "No, peace is a currency you've never been able to afford. Silas," Cassian retorted, his voice lethally calm. He hadn't moved, but his entire posture was coiled, a predator ready to spring. My eyes, now adjusted to the dim light, caught a detail I hadn't noticed before. On Silas's cuff, where a normal man would have a simple gold or silver link, was a small, intricately carved silver sparrow. A sparrow. Kestrel Wharf, the logo for the winning bid. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This was never a bid. It was a coronation, and I was supposed to be the unwitting delivery girl for the crown. I felt Cassian's gaze on me, saw him register the understanding on my face. He leaned toward me, his voice a low, urgent whisper that brushed against my skin. "If you walk out that door alone, they will follow you. They won't stop at your door. They'll go through it. They will get that portfolio, and they will erase anyone who can connect it back to them. You, your sister." He laid out the choice with brutal simplicity. It wasn't a choice at all. On one side was Silas Keir, a man who would put a sniper on a 24-year-old girl to secure a business deal. On the other was Cassian Vale, a man whose name inspired fear and commanded an army in the shadows. Both were monsters of a kind, born of New Avalon's dark underbelly, but one of them had put his jacket over my shoulders. I looked from Silas's predatory smile to Cassian's unreadable, stormy eyes. I gave the slightest of nods. My decision was made. Cassian straightened up, turning his full attention back to Silas. He took a half step, positioning himself slightly in front of me. The move was subtle, possessive, a drawing of a line. "The girl stays," he said, his voice resonating with an authority that seemed to shake the very air in the room. "The seal stays." He looked directly at me, then back at his rival, a final, irrevocable declaration. "From this moment on, anyone who touches her touches the Vale Consortium." Silas Keir's smile didn't falter, but it tightened at the edges, turning brittle. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible bow of his head, a gesture of acknowledging a lost chess move, not a defeat. An interesting choice. "Vale," he said, his voice a low purr that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Protecting stray kittens. Let's hope she's worth the trouble she'll bring to your door." He turned and walked away, melting back into the shadows of the gallery as if he were made of them. The confrontation was over, but the war had just been declared. Cassian's hand left my elbow. The absence of his touch was as jarring as its presence had been. "We go back out," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "You are my guest for the remainder of the evening. You will stay close to me or to Jax. You will talk to no one about what happened here. Our friend Finch is tracing the digital breadcrumbs that led you here. We need to buy him time. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. My role had changed. I was no longer a courier, a victim, or a mistake. I was a performance. I was playing the part of Cassian Vale's guest, a piece of strategic theater designed to keep me alive. Returning to the Gala was a surreal experience. The whispers followed us, but their texture had changed. The earlier mockery was gone, replaced by a mixture of fear, awe, and feverish speculation. I was no longer trash in a borrowed dress. I was a mystery, a woman who had arrived as a nobody and was now draped in the tuxedo jacket of the most dangerous man in the city. Every eye was on us. Cassian seemed oblivious, guiding me toward a relatively quiet alcove, procuring a glass of water for me with a silent command to a passing waiter. He didn't hover, but I felt the invisible tether between us, a circle of his influence that no one dared to cross. My phone, tucked away in my small clutch, vibrated. I nearly jumped out of my skin. My first thought was June, a fresh wave of panic washing over me, but the name on the screen wasn't my sister. It was Nora Keene. I knew the name. She was the sharpest Port Authority columnist in New Avalon, her articles dissecting the city's shipping deals with a surgeon's precision. I'd read her work to prepare for this disaster of a job. The message was short, cryptic. "I have information on the Bureau of Maritime Commerce Oversight, something you need to see. Rooftop, now." My blood turned to ice. How did she know I was connected to that? How did she get my number? I looked up, and Cassian was already watching me. His eyes narrowed on my face. He'd seen my reaction. I showed him the phone. He read the message, his expression unreadable. It could be a trap. It could be an answer, I countered, a boldness I didn't know I possessed rising in me. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze sweeping the room. "Jax will go with you," he finally said. "I'll be close by. Don't let her give you anything. Don't agree to anything. Just listen." Jax appeared at my side, a silent, solid presence. As we made our way toward the elevators, I felt a sudden, nagging suspicion. I pulled out the original Gala invitation mister. Dawes had given me. It was a thick cardstock, elegant and simple, with a QR code for express entry, the code Henry had refused to even scan. On a hunch, I opened the camera on my phone and scanned it. It didn't link to the Starling Museum's guest list. It linked to a dummy data server, the kind used for tracking, a digital beacon. Scanning it would have pinged my exact location to whoever set the trap. Dawes hadn't just sent me with a forged document, he had sent me with a tracking device, painting a target on my back for Silas's sniper. The realization hit me with nauseating force. I wasn't just a pawn, I was a sacrifice. The elevator doors opened onto a service staircase that led to the roof. Jax went first, moving with a silent efficiency that was both comforting and terrifying. The air on the roof was cold and damp, smelling of the nearby ocean. The city spread out below us, a glittering tapestry of light and shadow. Nora Keene was waiting by the ledge, a silhouette against the skyline. She was whip-thin, dressed in a practical black pantsuit, her face sharp and intelligent. "You're taller than you look in the lobby," she said without preamble, her eyes flicking from me to Jax and back again. "And you've brought a chaperone. Smart." "You wanted to see me," I said, crossing my arms, partially to ward off the cold and partially to hold myself together. "I didn't want to see you," she corrected. "I wanted to see who was holding your leash. Turns out it's Vale. That makes things more complicated, and a lot more interesting." She held out a small, metallic object, a USB drive. "Here. This is what they're trying to bury. Or, more accurately, who they're trying to bury, which is you." Jax stepped forward, taking the drive before I could. Nora didn't seem surprised. "What is it?" I asked. Her eyes bored into mine. It's a series of encrypted contracts, money laundering, tidy and neat, routed through a tax-sheltered warehouse at Pier 19N. a warehouse controlled by the vertigrous union. They've been skimming from city infrastructure funds for years. The forged TAOCD memo you were carrying was the final piece of the puzzle, the legal cover they needed to finalize the transfer of the Kestrel Wharf lease to a shell corporation they own. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Dawes was bought and paid for weeks ago. He's small time, but he was the perfect cutout. They needed a clean entry, a believable delivery from a reputable foundation. If this ever blew up, the story would be simple. A low-level temp got greedy and tried to pass off a forged document to sabotage the bid. They'd ruin you, discredit the document, and walk away clean. You were the fall guy, Lila. The word hung in the cold air between us. The fall guy, the trash. It all made a horrible kind of sense. Suddenly, a low, buzzing sound cut through the wind. It grew louder, a high-pitched whine like an angry insect. Jax's head snapped up. "Get down," he yelled, shoving both me and Nora toward the heavy steel housing of the roof's air conditioning unit. A dark shape materialized against the night sky. A drone. It swooped toward us, fast and silent. Before I could even process the threat, Jax had a handgun in his hand. It wasn't a loud crack, but a suppressed, muffled thump. The drone stuttered in the air, its rotors screaming, and then plummeted, smashing onto the rooftop 20 feet away. Down on the street below, I saw headlights cut through the darkness. A convoy of black, unmarked sedans was pulling up to the curb, their movements coordinated and predatory. They weren't police. The world seemed to explode in a shower of glittering dust. The massive plate glass door we had come through shattered inwards, blasted by a shockwave or a projectile. I screamed, instinctively throwing my arms over my head. A hard body slammed into mine, driving me to the ground, shielding me from the storm of glass. It was Cassian. He must have been moving the second he heard the drone. He covered my body with his own as razor-sharp shards rained down around us. I could feel the tense, hard planes of his back, the steady thrum of his heart against my ear, a calm rhythm in the midst of chaos. He pulled a small, flat device from his inner pocket and pressed a button. A tiny green light blinked on. "Jammer," he said, his voice a low rumble in my ear. "They won't get a lock on your position now." He pushed himself up, pulling me to my feet. Nora was staring at him, her reporter's cynicism warring with sheer shock. "Since when does the mob play this clean?" she breathed, gesturing to the jammer, the professional takedown of the drone. "No mess, no noise." Cassian looked at her, his eyes cold as chips of ice. "Clean isn't a moral code, Nora," he said. "It's a strategy." As if on cue, Nora's phone began to ring, its shrill tone cutting through the aftermath. She looked at the caller ID, her face paling slightly. She answered, putting it on speaker. "Keen," she said, her voice tight. "Nora?" Marcel Voss, a smooth, political voice, answered. "Assistant District Attorney Voss. I knew his name from the papers, too. I'm hearing some strange chatter about a disturbance at the Starling, and something about a young woman named Lila Hart causing a scene with a fraudulent document. You're my go-to on port business. I have a feeling a big story is about to break. You give me a direct quote, point the finger at the girl, and I can guarantee you an exclusive on the indictment. We can be partners on this." My stomach dropped. It was happening. The frame-up. They were activating the city's legal machinery to crush me. I was no longer just a target for Silas's thugs. I was a public enemy in the making. Cassian's hand found my arm, his grip firm and grounding. He met my terrified gaze, and his expression was resolute. "Let's go," he said, his voice cutting through my panic. "We don't win this with words tonight." He started pulling me toward the service stairs, Jax falling into step behind us, a formidable rear guard. "Wait," Nora called out. She was looking at the shattered drone, at the unmarked cars gathering below, at the USB drive still clutched in Jax's hand. She was a journalist, and she could smell the truth beneath the lie Voss was trying to sell her. She knew this was bigger than one girl with a fake document. "You've got 24 hours, she said to Cassian, her voice regaining its professional steel. "After that, I run with what I have, with or without you. But for the next 24 hours, I'll hold them off. I'll keep her name out of it, in return. You give me the real story. All of it. Cassian didn't break his stride. You'll have your story. Nora, he called back over his shoulder as we descended into the darkness of the stairwell, leaving the cold wind and the glittering, dangerous city behind us. Just make sure you're ready to print it. We didn't take the lobby. Jax, a silent phantom, guided us through a maze of stark, concrete service corridors that felt a universe away from the museum's opulent, glass-walled prison. The air was cold, smelling of dust and industrial cleaner. We emerged into a subterranean parking garage, the air thick with the smell of cold exhaust. A black sedan, low and aggressive, sat idling in the shadows, its engine a low, synthesized purr. Jax opened the rear door. I slid in. The leather seats cold against my legs. Cassian followed, his presence beside me immediately filling the small space, making it feel both smaller and infinitely safer. Jax took the wheel. The car shot up the ramp and burst onto the wet streets of New Avalon. The city lights smeared across the rain-slicked windshield like wet paint. I instinctively looked out the back window. My heart, which had just started to settle, leaped back into my throat. The unmarked sedans, 3 of them. They had been waiting. They pulled out from the curb with a smooth, synchronized arrogance, their headlights boring into our back window, a pack of hyenas that had finally flushed their prey. "They're on us," I whispered, the words feeling stupid and redundant. "They were always on us," Cassian said, his voice completely calm. He wasn't looking back, he was watching his side mirror, tracking their movements. They just didn't know who they were following. Now they do. Our small convoy of 3 identical sedans plunged into the glass quarter. This was Cassian's home turf. The architecture shifted, the friendly pre-war brick giving way to towering structures of steel and reflective glass. The buildings acted like funhouse mirrors, throwing distorted reflections of our cars and our pursuers back at us, making it impossible to tell how many there really were. "Here," Cassian said. Our convoy split. The car in front of us veered hard left, the car behind us right. The pursuing sedans hesitated for a split second, confused, then split up to follow. Jax didn't go left or right, he drove straight, aiming for what looked like a solid brick wall, the rusted, graffitied facade of a derelict shipping warehouse. My hands flew to the dashboard, a scream building in my throat. At the last possible second, a gap appeared, a dark, narrow tunnel, unmarked and unlit, the Artemis Tunnel. Jax wrenched the wheel, and we plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. He hit a switch. All our lights, headlights, taillights, dashboard died. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. I couldn't see anything. Not the tunnel walls, not my own hands, not the man sitting inches from me. I was completely blind, hurtling through the dark. "Breathe, Lila," Cassian's voice commanded, low and steady beside me. Before I could, another switch clicked. A low, purple-white glow emanated from beneath the car's chassis, and the tunnel lit up, not with overhead lights, but with hundreds of tiny, reflective markers embedded in the pavement and along the walls, markers invisible to the naked eye, glowing brilliantly under the car's UV floodlights. Jax navigated the twisting, narrow path with practiced ease, following a secret map only he could see. We were a ghost, moving through the city's veins. We had disappeared. 5 minutes later, we emerged into a quiet cobblestone alley in a part of the city I didn't recognize. The tunnel exit was hidden behind the corrugated steel door of what looked like a defunct auto shop. The rain had softened to a mist. Jax parked behind a building from which the low, soulful cry of a saxophone drifted. A simple, carved wooden sign hung over a heavy oak door. The Orchard. It was a jazz club, tucked away and forgotten by time. Cassian led me inside. The club was a pocket of warmth and shadow. It smelled of old wood, bourbon, and the faint, sweet scent of pipe tobacco. A small trio played on a low stage, their music weaving a spell over the handful of patrons scattered in the booths, all of whom seemed utterly absorbed. paying us no mind. A woman with a storm of silver hair pinned back from a face that had seen everything stood behind the bar, polishing a highball glass. She looked up as we entered, her eyes sharp as obsidian chips, landing on Cassian. She didn't smile, but her expression softened with a deep, weary respect. "Mr. Vale," she said, her voice a low, smoky rasp. "Ria Costa." "Ria?" He nodded. "Ada?" "In the cellar? Waiting," she replied, already turning back to her glass. The exchange over. Cassian's hand was on my back again, not touching but hovering, a field of energy guiding me past the bar and through a door marked "Private." We descended a narrow flight of wooden stairs into what should have been a wine cellar. Instead, it was a command center. The walls were lined not with bottles, but with tactical maps of the new Avalon port and high-definition monitors displaying code, security feeds, and data streams. A woman in a razor-sharp charcoal suit stood at the central table, her back to us. She turned as we entered. This was Ada Morrow. Her gaze was analytical, assessing me in a fraction of a second, registering the borrowed dress, the jacket, the fear. "Lila Hart," she stated. "It wasn't a welcome. It was a confirmation of a data point. Finch is already running the drive Nora gave you. You've had a difficult evening." She turned to Cassian. "All business. The data is clean. Encrypted ledgers confirming everything Nora suspected. A shell company, Gray Lantern Holdings, has been funneling the skim TAOCD funds. It's a direct pipeline to a holding account for Pier 19N. She pointed to a high-resolution image on one of the monitors. It was a microscopic scan of a document seal. "And you were right about the printer, boss." Finch pulled the service logs from Albion Printworks. Their Heliotrope 7 machine, the only one in the city, had an unscheduled calibration yesterday afternoon. My mind flashed back to the dark gallery, to Silas Keir's arrogant, polite posture. "His cufflinks," I said, my voice sounding thin in the high-tech room. Ada and Cassian both turned to me. "What about them?" Ada asked, her tone sharp. "They were silver," I said, gaining confidence. "Little birds, sparrows, kestrels. Kestrel Wharf. He was wearing their logo." A flicker of appreciation lit Ada's eyes. She nodded, impressed. "Hiding in plain sight. Arrogant." She tapped a few keys, bringing up a secure message log. "It fits. We intercepted this an hour ago. A final inspection review for the wharf is being signed tomorrow night. With your forged memo to prove TAOCD jurisdiction and a public complaint from ADA Voss, they'll seize the lease under a false flag. Silas, representing the public interest via the Verdigris Union, will be the one to sign off on the new secure contract." The sheer, suffocating completeness of the trap made me dizzy. I was supposed to be the spark, the excuse. I felt Cassian's eyes on me again. He hadn't moved, but the space between us felt charged, a static hum in the air. I was shivering, the adrenaline finally crashing, leaving me cold and exposed despite the warmth of his jacket. His gaze softened for a fraction of a second. A silent, non-verbal question. "Are you holding on?" I could only nod, pulling the lapels of his jacket closer. "Finch has the money," Ada continued, mercifully turning back to her screen. "The Gray Lantern account has been making structured, untraceable payments to an offshore account. He cracked it 5 minutes ago. The account belongs to Robert Dawes." "Mr. Dawes." The name landed like a punch. The image of his pale, sweaty face, his frantic "don't let this out of your sight" flashed in my mind. He wasn't scared for me. He was scared of what I was carrying. He set me up," I whispered, the betrayal a cold, sick feeling in my stomach. "The QR code on the invitation. I scanned it on the way to the roof. It was a tracker." "It was more than that." A new voice crackled from a speaker system set into the wall. "Finch." His voice was young, fast, and electric. "I'm digging into your life, Lila. Apologies for the intrusion, but Dawes was thorough. He's the one who leaked your phone number to Nora Keene's office, priming her for the disgraced temp story. He was building your coffin." I felt ill, violated. "My email," I said, the memory surfacing. I sent him an email this morning. Just an internal note, confirming I had the portfolio and was on my way. Which he never read. Finch's voice snapped. Because it was automatically forwarded. Your work computer has been compromised for at least 2 weeks. Keylogger, screen scraper, the works. They knew every move you were making. Your phone, Cashin said. It was a flat command. Jax, who had been standing by the stairs like a statue, stepped forward. He must have retrieved my small clutch from the car, and he held out his hand. My fingers trembled as I unlocked my phone and placed it in his palm. He handed it to Ada, who plugged it into a complex-looking diagnostic rig. "Oh, this is nasty." Finch whistled over the speaker after a moment of furious typing. "Military-grade Trojan. It was delivered via a text message 3 days ago. Looked like a delivery notification from the post office." I remembered it. I had clicked the link. They had been in my pocket ever in... "The source code on this malware," Finch said, his voice losing its breezy quality. "It's a signature I've seen before. It belongs to a developer on the Port Authority payroll, Captain Rudd." "Rudd," Cassian said, the name dropping like a stone in the quiet room. "Silas has owned him for a year. They knew everything, my route, my schedule, my home, my sister." "June," I gasped, the air leaving my lungs. The fear was a physical thing, a cold hand closing around my heart. The cameras at her apartment, Finch said they were compromised. What if they did something? "They're using her," Cassian said, his voice sharp, cutting through my rising panic. "She's leverage. They want us to know they can reach her. We cut the doubt. Now." He nodded to Ada. "Get Finch to patch her through on a clean line." Ada handed me a heavy, sterile-looking satellite phone. She'd already dialed. My hand was shaking so violently I could barely hold it to my ear. It rang once, twice. My heart stopped. "Hello," June's voice, groggy, annoyed, and absolutely, unequivocally safe. "June," I choked, sinking against the table. "Oh my God, June, are you okay?" "Lila, what's wrong?" Her voice sharpened with concern. "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm at the apartment. I was asleep. My shift doesn't start for another hour. You sound awful. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied, tears of pure, unadulterated relief streaming down my face. "I'm fine. I had a weird night. I just needed to hear your voice. Everything is normal. The doors are locked." "Yes, Lila, everything is normal. You're being paranoid. Go to bed." "Okay, I will. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow." "Love you too, weirdo." She hung up. I let out the breath I felt I had been holding for the last 3 hours. She was safe. They were watching her, but they hadn't touched her. "Leverage," Cassian said again, his eyes dark. "They're waiting. They want us to know they have an ace in the hole." I hadn't even had time to fully process the relief when a loud, violent thwack echoed from upstairs, vibrating through the floorboards. It was the sound of wood splitting. Ria's raspy voice called down the stairs, suddenly stripped of its calm. "Mr. Vale, you have a message." Jax was up the stairs before she finished, moving with a speed that defied his size. Cassian was a step behind him. I scrambled after them. The jazz club was empty. The musicians, the patrons, all gone. Ria stood behind the bar, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. The heavy oak back door, the one we had entered through, was vibrating slightly. Pinned to the dead center of the door, driven at least 3 inches into the thick wood, was a gleaming butcher's knife. It held a simple white envelope to the door. Jax gripped the handle and wrenched the knife free, the wood groaning in protest. He handed the envelope to Cassian. Cassian didn't need to open it. The message was on the front, written in thick black block letters. "Give us the girl. You get the pier." The air in the club was thick and cold, the raw, primal nature of the threat, the knife, the violation of this safe space, was suffocating. Ada had come up the stairs behind me. She looked at the note, then at the knife, her expression one of pure, cold analysis. "It's too direct," she said, her voice clipping the silence. "Silas is a snake, not a butcher. This is theater. He's trying to provoke a mistake." Cassian stared at the envelope. A dark energy was rolling off him, a palpable, dangerous cold. He looked from the note in his hand to the deep wound in his door, and then slowly, he looked at me. A small, cold smile touched the corner of his mouth, a terrifying expression that held no humor at all. "He thinks this will scare us," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "He thinks we're afraid. He's made his first real mistake." The knife was gone, but the deep, violent scar it had left in the oak door remained, a raw wound in the club's warm, dark heart. Rhea was methodically wiping down the bar, her movements sharp and angry, erasing any trace of the violation. Jack stood like a gargoyle by the splintered door, his eyes scanning the misty alley beyond. Ada was speaking in a low, rapid-fire voice into her phone, coordinating a dozen unseen pieces on a city-wide chessboard, and Cassian was just watching the door, his stillness more menacing than any overt threat. Then the world blinked. The power failed, the lights, the low hum of the coolers, the soulful lament of the saxophone, all of it vanished in an instant. We were plunged into a profound, velvety darkness. The only sounds left were the gentle drumming of the rain on the roof and the sound of our own breathing in the sudden, intimate silence. In that blackness, I became acutely aware of Cassian. He was only a few feet away, but I could feel his presence as a tangible heat. I could hear his breathing. It wasn't the ragged gasp of surprise or the shallow breath of fear. It was a slow, deep, impossibly controlled rhythm. The sound of a man leashing a hurricane inside his own chest. He was containing a rage so vast it seemed to suck the very air from the room. The darkness made me brave. It stripped away the pretense, the roles we were playing. Here, I wasn't his guest, and he wasn't my protector. We were just two people in a storm. "I hate it," I confessed, my voice a raw whisper that was immediately swallowed by the shadows. "I hate that feeling, being looked at like I'm nothing, like I'm trash, but that's not what scares me the most." My voice trembled, thick with unshed tears. "My biggest fear is pulling someone else into my mess, making them a target. My sister." I couldn't finish the sentence. The thought of June being tangled in this was a physical pain. I felt him move, a subtle shift in the darkness. Then the lightest, most hesitant touch brushed against the back of my hand, just the tips of his fingers. It wasn't a grab or a gesture of possession. It was a question. A tentative anchor offered in a turbulent sea. The contact was brief, a momentary spark of warmth against my cold skin. But it was enough. The frantic, terrified fluttering in my chest slowed, steadied by that single, restrained point of contact. His lips were slightly parted, his gaze a silent request for permission to close the distance. A moment later, the emergency lights flickered on. They weren't the harsh, clinical lights of a hospital, but a low, amber glow that bathed the room in the warm, intimate tones of honey and whiskey. The power was still out, but we could see again. He had taken a half step back, withdrawing his hand, giving me space. He stood just close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, but far enough that the next move was entirely, unequivocally mine. He had changed at some point. The tuxedo jacket he'd wrapped around me at the gala, the one that was probably covered in microscopic shards of glass, was gone. He now wore a simple, dark jacket over a charcoal gray Henley. It was the clothing of a man at work, not at a party. It made him seem more real, more dangerous, and somehow more human. My heart gave a slow, painful lurch. I looked up, meeting his stormy, unreadable eyes, and I made my choice. I raised my hand, the one he had just touched, and laid it gently on the lapel of his jacket. The wool was soft, the line of his chest beneath it unyielding. It was my answer, my consent. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He moved slowly, deliberately, giving me every chance to retreat, But I didn't. I stood my ground, my fingers curling slightly into the fabric of his jacket. The kiss, when it came, was not a collision. It was a discovery. His lips were softer than I'd imagined, but firm, tasting faintly of coffee and resolve. There was no desperate passion, no frantic claiming. It was a slow, quiet coming together, a moment of profound and desperate stillness in the middle of a war. My other hand came up to rest on his chest, and I could feel the steady, powerful beat of his heart through the layers of his clothing, a rhythm that was as calm and controlled as his breathing had been in the dark. A sigh escaped me, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. His hand came up to the back of my neck, his fingers gently threading into my hair, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin just below my ear. It wasn't a caress meant to incite passion. It was a gesture meant to soothe, to quiet the last of my trembling. In that moment, wrapped in the scent of cedarwood and rain, with my world burning down around me, I felt utterly and completely safe. The main power surged back on, the coolers hummed to life, and after a moment's hesitation, the lonely, beautiful cry of the saxophone started up again. The spell was broken. We separated slowly, reluctantly. He didn't step back far, but the small distance felt like a canyon. His eyes held mine, and in them, I saw a silent promise that mirrored the ache in my own chest. Safety first. Everything else will have to wait. "Sorry to break the moment," Ada's voice said, crisp and professional, from the top of the cellar stairs. Her timing was impeccable, her expression a perfect mask of neutrality. She walked toward us, placing a thin file on the bar. "We have work to do." I flushed, a wave of heat rising to my cheeks, and turned toward her, trying to gather my scattered thoughts. As I did, Cassian's hand brushed mine. He didn't hold it, just let his thumb sweep once, firmly, over my knuckles. It was a fleeting touch, but it was a contract, a silent, unspoken vow that resonated deeper than any words. We stood around the bar, the scarred back door a constant reminder of the threat outside. The next phase of the war was being planned. They wouldn't win by hiding. They would win by controlling the narrative. "From this point on, you are not a victim, Lila," Ada said, her gaze sharp. "You are a piece on the board, a very important one. We need to be able to anticipate your every move, and more importantly, your location." She placed a slim, silver bracelet on the polished wood of the bar. It was elegant, modern, not at all like a shackle. "This is a location tracker, encrypted, shielded, and untraceable to anyone but Finch. It is your choice to wear it." I looked from the bracelet to Cassian. This was the reality, to be safe in his world. I had to accept its rules, but they were giving me the dignity of choice. I picked up the bracelet. The metal was cool and heavy in my hand. I fastened it around my own wrist. The click as the clasp engaged was the sound of a door closing on my old life. This wasn't a chain. It was a survival code. Cassian nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Then he reached into his own jacket and pulled out something else. He slid it across the bar to me. It was a card, made of solid, heavy silver, about the size of a credit card. It felt cool and substantial in my palm. Engraved on its surface was a single, elegant image, a laurel wreath, rendered in black enamel, the sigil of the Veil Consortium. "In my world," he said, his voice a low rumble, "doors are not always open to everyone. Some are designed to stay shut. If you find yourself in front of one of those doors, if anyone ever denies you access, questions who you are, or tries to stop you, you show them that card." His eyes held mine, intense and serious. "There is no door in this city it will not open." I closed my hand around the silver card, its weight a heavy, terrifying, and strangely comforting reality. It wasn't just a key, it was a declaration, a claim. I was no longer Lila Hart, the temp in the badly hemmed dress. I was the woman who held the Veil sigil, and the city would now have to reckon with what that meant. There was no time for contemplation. The moment I fastened the bracelet, the world accelerated. Ada laid a schematic of an industrial complex on the bar. Albion Printworks. A red circle was drawn around a section labeled Finishing and Collation. "The Heliotrope 7 is here," she said, her finger tapping the circle. "It's an automated facility at night. One security guard on a 60-minute rotation. A second guard monitors the feeds from a central office 2 blocks away. Finch will loop the relevant cameras for exactly 6 minutes. That's your window." They gave me a set of dark, practical clothing, black cargo pants, a soft, long-sleeved black shirt, and rubber-soled boots. My borrowed Gala dress, a symbol of my first humiliation, was left in a heap. Cassian handed me a tiny, flesh-colored earpiece. "Finch will be your only voice," he said. "Listen to him without question." The plan was insane. It was a fragment from a spy movie, not a chapter in the life of a temp assistant. Yet, as I looked at the determined faces of Ada and Cassian, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time since I'd walked into the Starling Museum, I wasn't a victim being acted upon. I was part of the action. We took a different vehicle, a nondescript panel van that smelled of oil and old tools. Jax drove, Ada in the passenger seat. I sat in the back with Cassian. The dark, windowless space, a world of its own. He was checking a piece of equipment, a small black box with a series of complex ports. He didn't speak, but his focused silence was a strange comfort. "Team Alpha is in position," Ada said quietly, looking at a tablet. "Rooftop access is clear." That was her and Jax. Their job was to create a silent entry point from above, a secondary distraction if needed, and our exfiltration route, my route, was less glamorous. Jax parked in the shadow of a decaying warehouse a block away from Albion Printworks. "Good luck, kid," he grunted, a rare crack in his stoic facade. Cassian led me into a narrow, refuse-choked alley that ran behind the Printworks. The rain had started again, a cold, persistent drizzle. He stopped at a large, rust-stained metal chute. The stench of wet paper pulp and chemical ink was overwhelming. "This is the paper waste and slurry channel," he said, his voice low. "It feeds onto a conveyor that runs beneath the main printing floor. It's the only access point not wired with pressure sensors." Of course it was. The trash chute, the irony was so thick I could have choked on it. But this time, I wasn't being called trash. I was choosing to walk through it. He opened a maintenance hatch and went first, disappearing into the darkness. I took a deep breath, held it, and followed him down the ladder. The chute was slick with grime, and the conveyor belt below was a river of shadow. He helped me down the last few feet, his grip on my arm firm and steady. A tiny light on his wrist cast a faint glow. We were in a low, cramped tunnel, the massive belt dormant beside us. 3:44, a voice crackled in my ear. "Finch, you're on the clock. You have 6 minutes from the moment you step on the floor. Go." Cassian led the way, moving with a silent, fluid grace. We emerged through another hatch and onto the main floor of Albion Printworks. The place was cavernous, a cathedral of industry. Giant, silent machines stood like sleeping iron behemoths under the dim, yellow glow of security lights. In the center of the room, isolated and pristine, was the Heliotrope 7. It was a monster, a sleek, complex beast of chrome and black enamel. 4 minutes, 30 seconds, Sir Finch's voice said, a calm, steady metronome in my ear. We moved. Cassian went straight to the main control panel of the heliotrope, prying it open with a thin, specialized tool. I went to the side of the machine, my heart hammering against my ribs. My job. Ada had shown me the schematics, a small, mechanical override latch hidden behind a service panel. It was designed for engineers to lock the high-pressure ink arms in place during maintenance, preventing an accidental cycle that could crush a limb. Flipping it would freeze the machine in its current state, allowing Cassian to access the firmware without triggering an alert. My fingers, slick with nervous sweat, fumbled with the panel screws. I finally got it open. I saw the latch, exactly where Ada said it would be. A small, red, spring-loaded lever. I reached in. My breath held tight in my chest, and flipped it. A soft, satisfying click echoed in the silence. Maintenance lock engaged. I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. Copying, Cassian replied, his fingers flying across the device he'd connected to the printer's guts. 3 minutes, Finch said. Keep it clean. We were going to make it. The thought had just formed in my mind when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong, the squeak of a rubber sole on polished concrete. My blood ran cold. I dropped down, scrambling behind a tall, 4-wheeled cart stacked high with reams of uncut paper. I peered through a small gap, a security guard. He was walking a path that wasn't on the schematic, taking a shortcut directly through the main printing floor, and stitched onto the breast of his cheap, blue work jacket was a small, silver bird, a kestrel. He was one of Silas's men. He was heading right for the heliotrope, right for Cassian. My heart stopped. We were caught. This was it. But Cassian didn't move. He didn't hide. As the guard rounded the corner of the machine, Cassian straightened up, turning to face him. He didn't look like a man breaking into a high-tech facility. He looked bored, annoyed. Even, "Took you long enough," Cassian said, his voice carrying in the silent hall. It was a different voice, colder, flatter, laced with the unmistakable arrogance of a petty bureaucrat. "We buzzed the front gate 10 minutes ago." The guard stopped dead, his eyes wide with confusion and alarm. Who the hell are you?" Cassian sighed, a long, put-upon sound. He slowly reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to a non-existent badge. "Bureau of Maritime Commerce Oversight," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "We're running a red-level spot inspection on all port-adjacent supply chain vendors. Your facility was flagged for a potential customs seal discrepancy. Now, do you want to stand there and ask questions, forcing me to write up your non-compliance in my report and call your supervisor at this ungodly hour? Or do you want to keep your job and let me finish my diagnostic?" The guard paled. He saw the expensive cut of Cassian's clothes, heard the alphabet soup of bureaucratic agencies, felt the sheer, overwhelming force of his confidence. He swallowed hard. "No, sir, sorry, sir, no one told me you were coming." "They never do," Cassian said dismissively, turning back to the machine. "That's why it's called a spot inspection." The guard just stood there, frozen with indecision. This was my chance. While his attention was completely fixed on the terrifying bureaucrat who had materialized in his workspace, I slid my phone from my pocket. I aimed the camera at the printer's output tray. There they were, a fresh sheet of the forged seals, gleaming under the security light, not yet cut. I zoomed in, my hands shaking. I needed the tiny, almost invisible serial number printed in microdot font at the bottom of the sheet. I held my breath and pressed the button. The soft click of the shutter sounded like a cannon blast. "1 minute," Finch's voice buzzed in my ear. "Urgent now. Get it done." "Diagnostic complete," Cassian announced loudly, unplugging his device. He shot a withering look at the guard. "Try to be more alert." He started walking toward the shadows I was hiding in, not even giving the man a second glance. The guard, practically trembling with relief, scurried away in the opposite direction. As Cassian reached my hiding spot, a low, pulsing alarm began to chime softly from the main security panel near the entrance. A silent alarm. "Finch," Cassian murmured. "It's not us." Finch's voice was sharp with alarm. "It's an inbound alert. Silas's motorcade is en route to Pier 19N right now. He's moving up the timeline. He's signing the contract tonight." There was no more time for stealth. "Go!" Cassian grabbed my hand, pulling me into a run. We sprinted for the waste conveyor hatch, the soft alarm now a steady, insistent pulse. We scrambled down the ladder and onto the dormant belt. Cassian hit a manual override switch, and with a groan of protesting metal, the belt lurched into motion, carrying us into the darkness of the tunnel. We heard shouts from the floor above us. A moment later, a metal canister clattered down the chute behind us, hissing as it filled the tunnel with thick, acrid smoke. Jax's work. The belt was moving faster now, the tunnel walls a blur. A sharp metal support beam loomed out of the smoke-filled darkness. Cassian saw it a split second before I did. He spun, pulling me against his chest, turning his own body to take the impact. The edge of the steel beam scraped violently down his back with a screech of metal on fabric. He grunted in pain but didn't slow. His arms a steel cage around me, protecting me from the jagged edges of the tunnel. We tumbled out of the chute and into the alley, landing hard on the wet pavement. The rain was coming down in earnest now, plastering my hair to my face, washing the grime and the fear away. The panel van screeched to a halt beside us, its side door sliding open. Jax pulled us in. Ada was there, her face grim. As the van peeled away from the curb, leaving Albion Printworks behind, I looked at Cassian. His jacket was torn along the back, a long, ugly gash in the fine wool. He was breathing heavily, a sheen of sweat on his brow. He looked up and caught my eye. And then he did something I never thought I would see. A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't the cold, predatory smile he gave his enemies. It was a real smile, small and rare and utterly genuine, a flash of light in the darkness. "We got a piece of him," he said, his voice a low, satisfied rumble. We won a round. Ada, who was already on her tablet, analyzing the photo I'd sent, didn't look up. "Good," she said, her voice clipped and precise, "because there are 9 more to go." The high of the heist, the strange, fleeting taste of victory, evaporated with the cold light of dawn. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and the acidic tang of fear. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the hours before sunrise in the cellar of the orchard, which I now understood was Cassian's true fortress, watching Ada and Finch dismantle Silas Keir's empire, one data packet at a time. Rhea had brought me a mug of coffee so strong it felt like a jolt of electricity. I was staring at a monitor when the local morning news began. There he was, Mayor Rowan Pike, his face a mask of practiced civic concern, standing at a podium bearing the city seal. "We will not stand for threats to the integrity of our port," he said, his voice resonating with false sincerity. "We are working closely with the Tri-County Anti-Organized Crime Directorate to ensure that all bidding processes are transparent and secure." My stomach turned. It was a performance, a preemptive strike, and then I saw him, not at the podium, but standing just behind the mayor, in the second row, like a loyal advisor, Silas Keir, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his expression one of solemn support, and there, glinting on the lapel of his dark suit, was the silver sparrow, the kestrel. He was standing on the steps of City Hall, wrapping his conspiracy in the flag, daring us to call him a liar. "He's good," Ada murmured, not looking up from her phone. She was on a call, her voice low and rapid. "Nora Ada Morrow. Yes, I'm sure you're getting a lot of calls this morning. Ignore them. Check the encrypted drive I just sent you." A pause. I watched Ada pace the small room, a predator in a cage. "That," she said, "is the full payment ledger from Grey Lantern Holdings, a direct link from the TAOCD's slush fund to Meister Dawes, and a half-dozen other names you'll recognize. It also includes a high-resolution photograph of the Heliotrope 7's uncut print sheet, taken last night. Serial number matches the forged memo you saw." She was giving her the whole thing, the fruit of our insane, terrifying night. "You have the story of the year, Nora," Ada continued, her voice like ice. "In return, I want 48 hours. My client, Lila Hart, remains a protected source. Her name stays out of every article, every blog post, every late-night whisper. You protect her. You get the exclusive. You burn her. And this drive and you will disappear. Do we have a deal?" Ada listened, then snapped the phone shut. "The press is muzzled, for now." "It's not enough," Cassian said, entering the room. He'd shed the torn jacket from last night, and in the stark light of the cellar, he looked every bit the commander. "A story Nora hasn't published is just a rumor. Thompson and the Port Sovereignty Commission still think they have plausible deniability. We're going to take that away from them." He looked at me. "You're coming with me." An hour later, I was a different person. Ada had provided a change of clothes from a contingency wardrobe Rhea kept, a pair of impeccably tailored black trousers, a cream-colored silk blouse, and low, practical heels. My hair was pulled back in a severe, professional knot. Gone was the temp. In her place was a woman who looked like she belonged in a boardroom. The silver bracelet was hidden under my sleeve. The silver veil card was a cold, heavy weight in my pocket. We didn't take the sedan. We took an elevator from the orchard cellar that connected to a private garage, and from there, a black town car with tinted windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian. The Atria building was the heart of the glass quarter, a sterile, glittering tower of corporate power. We were escorted to a conference room on the top floor, a glass box suspended in the sky, with a panoramic view of the harbor, the very prize they were all fighting over. The members of the Port Sovereignty Commission were already seated, 5 men and 2 women who looked like their portraits already hung in university libraries. Chairman Thompson, a man with a shock of silver hair and a deeply tanned, unlined face, sat at the head. "Mr. Vale," he began, his voice a smooth, patrician baritone. "An unexpected pleasure. We are, as you can imagine, extremely busy. Your interest in port logistics is sudden." Cassian didn't sit. He walked to the head of the table and placed a tablet softly on the polished wood, sliding it in front of Thompson. "I'm here about your calibration problem." Thompson's eyes flickered with annoyance. He glanced down at the tablet. On the screen was the photo I had taken, the high-resolution, damning close-up of the Heliotrope 7's print bed, the sheet of forged seals, the microscopic serial number clearly visible. I watched Thompson. His smile didn't waver, but it became a fixed, brittle thing. "Printer test," he said dismissively. "Our vendors run them constantly." "They do," Cassian agreed softly. He slid a second tablet onto the table, right next to the first. On its screen was a spreadsheet, Finch's work, and they're usually paid in dollars, not in vintage car parts. He tapped the screen, highlighting a line item. A 1968 Porsche 911 transmission, paid for by Gray Lantern Holdings, delivered to your son's garage in Westchester. A charitable donation of $50,000 to your wife's foundation, which, according to state records, has been defunct since 2019. A very generous gift list for a simple calibration. This was what I was here for, to be the witness. I watched Chairman Thompson's face. The boardroom was silent. The only sound, the faint hum of the building's ventilation. I saw the muscle in his jaw leap, just once. I saw a single, perfect bead of sweat form at his left temple and trace a tiny, slow path down into his silver hair. He knew. He knew that we knew. He wasn't just looking at a rival. He was looking at the man who held the keys to his cage. "What do you want?" "Vale," Thompson whispered, all pretense of power gone. "You will table the Kestrel Wharf vote indefinitely, pending a full audit." Cassian commanded. "You will launch a formal, internal investigation into the TAOCD's jurisdictional overreach, and any time a man named Marcel Voss or Silas Keir calls you, you will find that you are suddenly, unavoidably, unavailable." We walked out of the room without a backward glance. We had won the round, but the counterpunch came faster than I could have imagined. We were back in the town car, speeding away from the Atria. When Ada's phone buzzed, she read the email, and her face hardened. "They're moving on you, Lila. The TAOCD just issued a formal summons, a deposition, tomorrow morning. They're trying to drag you into their jurisdiction, separate you from us." A process server was, at that moment, standing outside my apartment, ringing a doorbell I would never answer. The legal trap was snapping shut. Cassian didn't even seem fazed. He made a call. "Get me Judge Constantine's clerk." "Yes, I'll hold." He looked at Ada. "File the petition, Clause 9B, Port Authority Charter. File it now." He turned to me, the phone still pressed to his ear. "In the new Avalon Port Authority Charter," he explained, his voice a calm counterpoint to the panic rising in my chest. "There is a provision for protecting infrastructure integrity, Clause 9b. It classifies any individual with direct material evidence of a threat to port sovereignty as a protected federal witness. It supersedes municipal authority." He spoke into the phone. "Yes, this is Vale. I'm filing on behalf of my client, Hart Lila H. Effective immediately." He hung up. "The summons is void. ADA Voss just lost his legal authority over you. They can't touch you." He had built a legal fortress around me in the space of a 90-second phone call. But Silas hadn't become a kingpin by following the rules. If the legal move failed, there was always the personal. We had just returned to the orchard when Jax, who had been dispatched to shadow my sister's apartment, called. His voice was low and tight. "We have a problem. A delivery." My blood went cold. "Is she okay, Jax? Is June okay?" "She's fine," he growled. "She never saw it. Finch flagged the van. I intercepted it on the curb." On a monitor in the cellar, an image appeared, a photo taken by Jax. It was a massive, opulent bouquet of white lilies, the kind of arrangement you send to a funeral. The card, propped among the funereal blooms, read my deepest apologies for the confusion. S. It was bugged. Finch's voice came over the speaker, cold with fury. High-end transmitter tucked right into the floral foam. He was going to listen to her apartment. He's taunting us. He's saying, "I can get to her door any time I want." I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back, my hand over my mouth, the sight of those flowers making me sick. He had sent a threat directly to my sister. "That's it," Cassian said, his voice a flat, deadly monotone. "She's not leverage anymore. Jax, move her. Full protocol. Take her to the Night Orchard Annex. No phones, no contact. She's a ghost until this is over." I watched, numb, as my sister's life was erased for her own protection, all because of me. Ada pulled up the port map, the same one I'd seen fanned out on the museum floor what felt like a lifetime ago. "They're cornered," she said. "The legal summons failed. The intimidation failed. They've lost their leverage on your sister. They'll revert to the original plan." She pointed to the map. "Silas has to sign that contract for Pier 19N. He's lost the legal cover of the TAOCD, thanks to our meeting with the commission, but if you, the sole witness, were to disappear, the whole thing falls apart. Nora's story becomes unsubstantiated rumor. The commission gets cold feet and blames a disgraced temp who fled. Hiding you is a losing game. Lila, they'll hunt you, and if they can't find you, they win by default." I stared at the map, seeing the trap close. If I hid, I lost. If I was caught, I lost. "So we don't hide her," Cassian said into the silence. Ada and I both turned to look at him. "We do the exact opposite," he said, his eyes finding mine. "We put her right back where this started. The mayor's community reinvestment gala is tomorrow night at the Starling Museum." My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. "Go back there." "Cassian, it's a suicide mission," Ada argued, her voice sharp. "You're not putting her in the spotlight. You're putting her on a pedestal with a target painted on her back. She'll be a sitting duck." "She'll be the most protected person in that room," Cassian countered, his voice absolute. "Silas can't move against her in a room full of the city's elite. Not directly. He'll be there. The mayor will be there. The commission will be there. Every shield we have will be standing in front of her." They both looked at me. It wasn't a command. It was somehow a choice. My choice. I thought of the laughter in that lobby. I thought of the word trash. I thought of the sniper's red dot, the knife in the door, the sickening white lilies meant for my sister. I thought of June, a ghost in a safe house because I was too weak to stop this. My fear was a cold, hard stone in my stomach, but something else was rising to meet it, a slow, burning anger. "I'll do it," I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "I want to go back." Cassian watched me, his expression unreadable. "They put a label on me that night," I said, meeting his gaze. "They decided I was nothing, a fall guy, a disposable piece of trash, and they've been trying to make me that ever since. I touched the silver card in my pocket. If I go back there, I'm not going as their victim. I'm going as your witness. I'm going to put a new label on myself. I'm going to be the one who tells the truth. The 24 hours that followed were a blur of calculated warfare. While I was kept insulated within the warm, wood-paneled safety of the orchard, Cassian and his team moved with the silent, deadly precision of a coming storm. I saw pieces of it on the monitors in the cellar. A key witness in a pending fraud case against one of Silas's shell companies suddenly recanted his testimony. A shipment of untaxed liquor was conveniently discovered by the harbor wardens at a verdigris union-controlled warehouse. Tying up their resources, Nora Keene published a scathing, but anonymous, op-ed about shadow interests threatening port integrity, priming the public for a bigger story. Each move was a jab, designed to throw Silas off balance before the main event. But as night fell, the night before, I was scheduled to step back into the lion's den. The weight of it all became too much. The walls of the jazz club, once a sanctuary, started to feel like a cage. I needed air. I found my way to the roof, the same roof where I had met Nora, where the world had shattered in a rain of glass. But tonight, it was quiet. The drizzle had stopped, and the wind coming off the Atlantic was cold and clean. It smelled of salt and distance, and for a moment, it washed away the lingering scent of fear and conspiracy. The city glittered below me, a breathtaking, indifferent beast. Tomorrow, all its eyes would be on me. I gripped the cold metal of the safety railing, my knuckles white, a wave of vertigo threatening to pull me over the edge. I wasn't just afraid of what Silas would do. I was afraid of failing, afraid of letting all these people, this entire dangerous, intricate machine, down. Afraid that when the lights hit me, I would just be that girl in the borrowed dress again. Footsteps sounded on the gravel behind me. I didn't have to turn. I knew his tread, the quiet, deliberate sound of a man who never made an unintentional move. Cassian. He came to stand beside me at the railing, without Jax or Ada or any of his other shadows. Just him. We stood in silence for a long time, watching the endless flow of traffic on the distant causeway. "They're all just trying to get somewhere," I said, my voice barely a whisper against the wind. "Home, work, away from something, towards something." "Everyone is," he agreed, his voice a low rumble. He reached into his pocket and then held out his hand. Lying on his palm was a small, smooth, gray stone, worn by time and water. It was utterly ordinary. "When I was a boy," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon, "my family lived in a small house in the Narrows, right against the old sea wall. This was before all of this. The wall was made of stones, just like this one. At night, I could hear the waves hitting them. It was the last thing I heard before I slept." He closed his hand over the stone and then pressed it into my palm. It was still warm from his touch. "Remember where you came from, Lila? It's the one thing they can't take from you. It's your starting point, your anchor." I looked down at the simple, worthless, priceless stone in my hand. It was the most honest thing anyone had given me in my entire life. The carefully constructed walls around my heart, the ones I had built to survive the casual cruelties of the world, crumbled into dust. I carefully placed the stone on the flat top of the railing and turned to face him. The wind whipped a strand of hair across my face, and he gently brushed it away, his fingers lingering for a fraction of a second against my cheek. That was all it took. I closed the space between us, my hands coming up to grip the lapels of his jacket. I rose on my toes and kissed him. This kiss was nothing like the first one. That had been a moment of quiet discovery. This was a desperate, frantic collision. It was raw and hungry, a plea and a demand all at once. My breath hitched, my chest pressing against the solid wall of his. I was pouring all my fear, all my anger, all my fragile, terrified hope into that single point of contact. His response was immediate. His arms came around me, pulling me tight against him. One hand splayed across the small of my back, the other cradling my head, his fingers tangling in my hair. He wasn't conquering me. He was holding me together, giving me his strength, his stillness. I clung to him, my fingers tightening on his jacket, pulling him impossibly closer, trying to erase the last remaining inch of space between us. The distant city lights blurred into a glittering haze behind my closed eyelids. I broke the kiss, gasping for air, and pressed my forehead against his. His skin was warm, his breathing as deep and steady as ever, a stark contrast to my own ragged gasps. "Don't let go," I whispered, the words a raw prayer against his skin. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "Never," he murmured. He didn't kiss me again. Instead, he lowered his head and began to trace a slow, deliberate path of small, gentle kisses from my temple, down the sharp line of my jaw, to the frantic pulse fluttering at the base of my throat. Each touch was a reassurance, a brand of warmth against my cold skin, a silent vow that chased away the shadows. It wasn't a fire, it was a sunrise, a slow, steady warmth that promised to burn away the night. The wind gusted, colder this time, and I shivered. Without breaking the embrace, he shrugged out of his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders, a familiar, comforting weight. The scent of cedar and rain enveloped me once more. We stood there for a long time, wrapped in his jacket and each other's arms, two solitary figures against the city skyline, our heartbeats finally falling into the same steady rhythm. But the night had to end. The battle was still waiting. We established the rules of engagement. "When you're up there," he said, his voice serious as we stood by the rooftop door, "you are in control, but I am your fail-safe. If I see something you don't, a threat, a change in the plan, anything, I will give you a signal." He gently took my left hand. "I will touch your wrist, 2 fingers, right here." He tapped the spot just above my pulse point. "It's not a suggestion, it's an order. The moment you feel it, you stop talking and you walk off that stage. No hesitation, no questions. You just walk. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, my voice clear and steady. A secret signal, a lifeline only we would understand. His phone buzzed, a message from Ada. He showed me the screen. Nora confirmed for the 8 p.m. National slot, 24-hour protection deal holds. Silas just bought the 2-minute ad block immediately following her segment. He's planning to use her platform to launch his counter-narrative. The battlefield was set. The war would be televised. Cassian spent the next hour transforming me. He wasn't just my protector anymore. He was my director. He taught me how to stand, how to hold my shoulders back to project confidence I didn't feel. "Don't look at the people in the room," he instructed, his voice low and intense. "They don't matter. Find the main broadcast camera, the one with the red light. That's not a camera. It's a pipeline. You're not talking to a room, you're talking to the city. Look straight down the barrel of the lens and speak your truth. Don't let them see you blink." He physically adjusted my chin, lowering it by a fraction of a degree. "This makes you look determined, not defiant. It's the posture of a leader, not a victim." He was giving me his armor, piece by piece, the lessons he had learned over a lifetime of commanding rooms and bending men to his will. As the first hints of dawn began to soften the eastern sky, I looked at this complex, dangerous, and unexpectedly gentle man. The questions that had been swirling in my mind finally coalesced into one. "Before all this," I asked, my voice soft, "before you were Vale, before the orchard and the glass quarter and all of it, what did you dream of being?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze lost in the memory of a life I couldn't imagine. I thought he wouldn't answer. "A dock," he finally said, his voice so quiet I almost missed it. "I wanted to build a small boat dock, somewhere quiet, so quiet you could hear the wood of the piers swelling in the sun on a hot day." The answer was so simple, so unexpected, it stole the air from my lungs. It was a dream of peace, of creation, of quiet permanence. Everything his life was not. And in that moment, I understood. I understood the cold control, the brutal efficiency, the fortress he had built around himself. It was all to protect the ghost of that boy, the one who just wanted to build something real and lasting in a world that only seemed to know how to tear things down. The man standing in front of me wasn't just a shadow. He was the guardian of a long-dead dream, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would walk into the fire for him. Returning to the Starling Museum of Light was like returning to the scene of a crime. But this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the weapon. The first difference was the dress. Rhea had taken me to a room in the back of the orchard, a walk-in closet filled with what she called costumes for forgotten roles. From it, she'd produced a gown of deep, gunmetal gray silk. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have a single bead or sequin. But the cut was perfect, the fabric a cool, liquid weight against my skin. It fit like a second skin, like armor. When I walked, it moved with me, a whisper of power instead of a rustle of shame. The second difference was the whispers. As I stepped from the town car into the brilliant glare of the museum's entrance, the same gauntlet of cameras and judging eyes awaited. The whispers still followed me, a cloud of sound and speculation, but their tone had changed. The open mockery was gone, replaced by a feverish, hungry curiosity. I was no longer an object of pity. I was an enigma. On my phone, I saw Nora Keene's quiet work. A new hashtag was trending among the city's elite, a silent rebellion she had seated herself. She's not trash. Cassian was at my side, a silent, grounding presence in a perfectly cut dark suit. He didn't hold my arm. He didn't need to. The space around us was a fortress of its own. We had barely cleared the entrance when Silas Keir materialized in our path, his smile as slick and artificial as an oil spill. He looked from Cassian to me, his eyes lingering on the flawless lines of my dress. "Well, well," he said, his voice a low, condescending purr. "It seems fate has been unusually kind to you, Miss Hart." I met his gaze without flinching. The girl who had crumbled under a sneer in this very lobby was gone. "Fate doesn't know how to read a forged contract, Mr. Keir," I said, my voice clear and cold. "But I do." His smile tightened, the humor vanishing from his eyes, leaving behind something cold and reptilian. He gave a slight nod to Cassian, a silent acknowledgement between kings, and moved on. The main hall was a sea of glittering diamonds and brittle laughter. But tonight, it felt different. It was no longer a prison. It was an arena, and I was about to step into the center of it. Mayor Pike was already on stage, basking in the warm glow of the lights, delivering a speech full of empty platitudes about community and progress. Ada and Jax were ghosts in the crowd, Ada near the sound booth, Jax by the main exit, their eyes constantly moving, mapping every threat, in my ear. Finch's voice was a low, steady hum. "Cameras are live, broadcast feed is stable. I'm in their house. Lila, just give the word." "And now," the mayor said, his voice booming with false warmth, "we have a special guest, a young woman who had a rather memorable experience at our last gathering, a woman whose courage in the face of misinformation is an inspiration to us all. Please welcome Miss Lila Hart." A smattering of polite, confused applause followed me as I walked to the stage. The heat of the lights was a physical weight on my skin. I didn't look at the crowd, at the hundreds of faces staring up at me. I followed Cassian's instructions. I found the main broadcast camera, the one with the small, glowing red light. It wasn't a camera, it was a pipeline, a direct line to 1,000,000 living rooms across the city. Cassian stood near the side of the stage, his expression unreadable, but I felt his gaze like a shield at my back. I stepped up to the microphone. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I had 18 seconds. 18 seconds to burn down their world. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear and amplified, echoing through the vast hall. I looked straight down the barrel of the camera. 2 nights ago, in this room, I was called trash, and I've learned that's a word people use when they have something to hide. I paused for a single, calculated beat. So, I'll offer a piece of advice to the powerful men in this room. My eyes flicked for a fraction of a second towards Silas Keir. When you decide to call someone trash, you'd better be sure the bill for the collection doesn't have your name on it. As the last word left my lips, it happened. The massive video screen behind Mayor Pike, which had been displaying the Gala's logo, flickered, and then it changed. Finch's masterpiece. My high-resolution photo of the uncut sheet of forged seals from Albion Printworks filled the screen. 20 feet high. An arrow pointed to the microscopic serial number. Beside it, an image of the forged TAOCD memo from my portfolio appeared, with its own serial number magnified 1,000 times. They were a perfect, damning match. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a physical wave of sound, a tsunami of shock. I saw Silas's face, his mask of calm composure shattering into a rictus of pure fury. He barked an order to one of his men, who lunged for the cables at the side of the stage, but it was too late. "We seem to be experiencing a technical difficulty," I heard Nora Keene's voice say, calm and authoritative, from the television monitors scattered around the hall. Finch had hijacked not only the Gala's feed, but Silas's own pre-purchased ad block. "But what you are seeing is a document that appears to link the Verdigris Union's bid for Kestrel Wharf to a forged government seal. The story, it seems, is only just beginning." Chaos erupted. People were shouting, pointing at the screen, at Silas. His man yanked a cable, and the screen went black. But the damage was done. The image was burned into 1,000 retinas, broadcast live into 1,000,000 homes. In the middle of the pandemonium, I felt it. 2 fingers, pressing firmly against the inside of my left wrist. Cassian's signal, the order. My head snapped toward him. His expression was grim. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod toward the back of the auditorium. I followed his gaze and saw them. A team of men in dark windbreakers, the letters TAOCD stenciled in white on their backs, were moving through the crowd. They were flanking the stage and leading them. His face a mask of cold triumph. Was ADA Marcel Voss. They were going to arrest me right here, on live television for fabricating evidence, neutralizing me as a witness and turning their lie into the public truth. There was no time to think. I turned from the microphone and walked, just as he'd told me to. Jax was there in an instant, a solid wall of muscle appearing at the bottom of the stage steps. "This way," he growled, pulling me toward a side exit marked gallery staff. As we moved, I saw Ada intercept Voss's path. She didn't shout, she simply held up her phone. On its screen was a signed, time-stamped document. "Emergency injunction," I heard her say, her voice cutting through the noise. "Signed by Federal Judge Air Constantine, pursuant to Port Authority. Charter 9B. My client is a protected federal witness. Any attempt to detain her is an act of federal obstruction. I invite you to test that, Mr. Voss." Voss froze, his face a thundercloud of impotent rage. He'd been outmaneuvered, legally checkmated. Silas Keir did not believe in checkmates. He chose the butcher's route. The lights in the entire museum, the chandeliers, the stage lights, the emergency exit signs went out at once. We were plunged into absolute, disorienting darkness. Screams echoed in the blackness, the sounds of panic and confusion. The world was a suffocating blanket of black, but Cassian had planned for this. A moment later, a new set of lights flickered on. Not the bright, overhead lights, but a soft, linear strip of amber light, embedded in the floor. It illuminated a single, narrow path, leading away from the chaos, into the museum's back corridors. A private power circuit, his own personal escape route. Cassian had my hand. "Run," he said. We ran, following the amber line, leaving the screams and the chaos behind. The path led us into a long, quiet gallery I hadn't seen before. A special exhibit, the Hall of Mirrors. The walls, the ceiling, the floor all were covered in polished, angled mirrors. 1,000 versions of us ran through the amber-lit darkness, and in one of those mirrors, I saw her, a ghost, the girl from 2 nights ago, lost and terrified, her shoulders slumped, her only protection the heavy tuxedo jacket a stranger had draped over her. She looked small and broken and impossibly far away. I looked at my own reflection, the real one, right in front of me. My face was flushed, my eyes wide with adrenaline. Not fear. I was wearing a warrior's dress and a bracelet that was a code of survival. I was running not from a fight, but toward the next one. I ran past the reflection of the girl I used to be, leaving her behind in the cold, silent glass forever. The mirror-lined hallway spat us out into a service corridor, and then into the same subterranean garage where this nightmare had truly begun. The black sedan was waiting, its engine a low thrum of anticipation. This time, as we slid into the back, the air wasn't thick with my fear. It was electric with shared purpose. We drove, not to the safety of the orchard, but toward the dark, skeletal heart of the waterfront, Pier 19. The air grew thick and cold, heavy with fog that rolled in off the Atlantic, swallowing the city lights behind us. The mournful, distant cry of a foghorn was the only sound. The pier was a graveyard of shipping containers, stacked like mismatched coffins in the gloom. Dim yellow work lights cast long, distorted shadows. Ada met us at the mouth of the pier. She wasn't wearing a suit. She was in the same dark, tactical gear as Jack's. She handed me a small, discreet button. "This is a body camera," she said, her voice a low, urgent command as she clipped it to the lapel of my silk dress. "The feed is live, patched directly to Nora Keene's broadcast truck. From the second you step out there, the whole city is your witness. Don't let them forget it." Cassian gave me one last look, his stormy eyes searching mine. He didn't offer words of encouragement. He didn't need to. He simply nodded, a silent affirmation that we were walking into this together. Silas Keir was waiting at the end of the pier, near the dark, gaping maw of the cold storage warehouse. He was flanked by his own men, and, standing just behind him, looking pale and restless, were Chairman Thompson and 2 other members of the Port Sovereignty Commission. They were here to sign their kingdom over to him. Cassian walked forward, alone, into the no-man's land between our team and theirs. The fog swirled around his feet. "You wanted a negotiation, Silas." Cassian's voice cut through the damp air. "I'm here. I get the pier back. What do you get?" Silas chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. He stepped into the light, his silver sparrow glinting. "I'm a simple man. Vale. I get the girl, and I get your head on a plate." "A poor opening offer," Cassian replied, his voice lethally calm. "Oh, I think I have the leverage," Silas purred, and he gestured to the shadows. A figure was shoved forward, stumbling into the weak light. My breath caught in my throat. Mr. Dawes. His face was a mask of sheer, abject terror. "He signed a full affidavit," Silas announced, testifying that he caught Miss Hart fabricating documents, that she tried to blackmail him, and that when he refused, she ran to you, a tragic story of a young woman's greed, with a very tidy, very public ending. Dawes wouldn't look at me, and he was staring at his feet, trembling. This was Silas's checkmate, my word against his. But I was no longer the girl who worked for Mr. Dawes. I stepped forward, the body cam a tiny, cold weight on my chest. Cassian turned, a silent question in his eyes. I kept walking, past him, until I was standing 10 feet from the man who had set me up. "Mr. Dawes," I said. My voice was amplified by the small mic Ada had given me, clear and steady in the night air. He flinched, but still wouldn't look up. "They're paying you well to lie, but I wonder if it's enough." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. "This is an account number. Gray Lantern Holdings, offshore, account number 4772B. Dawes' head snapped up. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a new, dawning horror. "It's the account your bonuses have been paid into." I continued, my voice resonating with a cold I didn't know I possessed. The one you've been using to pay for your wife's medical treatments. The ones your foundation insurance wouldn't cover. I know, because I'm the one who used to file your claims. His face didn't just pale, it shattered. The fight, the lie, the terror, it all just drained out of him, leaving a hollow, broken shell. He knew, in that instant, that I had just given the entire world the motive for his crime. Silas saw it, too. He saw his trump card disintegrate, his face contorted, the mask of civility ripping away to reveal the butcher beneath. He reached inside his coat. He never cleared the leather. A muffled thump echoed across the pier. Jax, from a perch high on a container crane, invisible in the fog, he had fired a single shot. It wasn't a kill shot. It was a masterpiece of controlled violence. The bullet struck the metal railing just beside Silas's hand, sending a spray of hot shrapnel into his arm. He screamed, a high, thin sound of pain and rage, stumbling back, clutching his bleeding hand. That's when the second part of Jax's plan unfolded. The shot had also severed a high-tension support cable for a container suspended directly above the meeting points. With a groan of tortured metal, the massive 40-ton steel box began to tip, then fall, crashing onto the pier in a deafening explosion of sound and sparks. The ground shook. Everyone scattered. It was total chaos. Now, a voice shouted. The fake TAOCD team, led by a furious Marcel Voss, burst from the fog, their weapons drawn, converging on me. Lila Hart, you're under arrest for... Voss stopped, his words dying in his throat. Cassian was standing in his path, holding my small, silver veil card between two fingers. Judge Constantine's order. Clause 9B, Cassian said, his voice a low command. This woman is a federally protected witness, under the direct charter of the Port Sovereignty Commission. Every word you say is being broadcast live. Stand down, Mr. Voss, or you will be charged with federal obstruction. As if on cue, Nora's voice came from a small television set up inside the pier's security booth. We are now showing you a live split screen, she was saying, her voice a calm, authoritative anchor in the storm. On the left, the live feed from Pier 19N. On the right, the evidence from inside Albion Printworks. As you can see, the serial numbers match. The forgery is confirmed. We had them. The legal trap, the public trial. It was over. Silas knew it, too. With a desperate, animalistic roar, he pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed a button. A small, concussive blast erupted from the cold storage warehouse behind him. It wasn't a bomb meant to kill. It was meant to create chaos, to create an escape. A sheet of flame and ice crystals billowed out, and the pier was plunged into smoke and screaming. In the second before the blast hit, Cassian was on me. He didn't just shield me. He wrapped his entire body around me, pulling me to the ground, his arms covering my head, his back taking the full force of the debris and the shockwave. I was cocooned in his strength, in the familiar, safe scent of cedar. My world reduced to the frantic, steady beat of his heart against my ear. The smoke began to clear, and into the chaos, a new, organized force emerged, a dozen figures in the dark, professional uniforms of the new Avalon Harbor Wardens. Ada Morrow at their head, her face grim. This pier is now seized under federal authority, she shouted. All assets of the Verdigris Union are frozen, pending a federal investigation. Chairman Thompson and the commission members stood frozen, their faces ashen. They saw the cameras, they saw the wardens, they saw the irrefutable proof on the television. They had one move left. We support this action, Thompson stammered, raising his hands. The commission will cooperate fully to root out this corruption. They were saving themselves, scrambling for the winning side, Cassian's side. Silas was on his knees, his face a mask of blood and disbelief, surrounded by harbor wardens. Cassian didn't have him shot. He didn't order him to be thrown into the sea. He let the cameras roll, let the wardens cuff him, let the entire world watch as the legal, public mechanism he had set in motion snapped shut, It was the cleanest, most brutal victory I could have imagined. I saw Mr. Dawes. He had collapsed onto a pile of old rope, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Lila, please, I didn't—" I walked over to him, the anger gone, replaced by a cold, weary pity. "You were right, Mr. Dawes," I said, my voice quiet, but the mic carried it to the world. Trash is what people call things they're afraid to deal with, the things they try to hide under the rug. I looked from him to Silas, to the cowering commission. You just forgot how quickly the rugs get pulled. The city government imploded overnight. Nora's next broadcast featured a leaked recording of Mayor Pike promising preferential influence to Silas for a hefty campaign donation. The public outcry was deafening, demanding a full investigation. The pier was quiet, the air thick with the smell of ozone and wet pavement. The flashing lights of fire trucks and legitimate police cars painted the fog in strobes of red and blue. Cassian walked over to me. In his hands, he held the black tuxedo jacket, the one from the first night. Rhea had mended it. The fabric was whole again, the seams perfect. He didn't drape it over my shoulders this time. He held it out for me, as if I were his equal, as if I were a queen. I slid my arms into the heavy, silk-lined sleeves. It felt like a coronation. Nora Keene and her cameraman approached, the red light on. Cassian didn't turn away. He looked straight into the lens, his arm settling around my waist, pulling me to his side. "They called her trash," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried across the nation. "I call her the one who stands tall when the hurricane hits." He looked down at me, and I smiled. It wasn't a smile of fear, or relief, or even triumph. It was a smile of peace. I reached up and took his hand, not to hide behind him, but to stand beside him. Nora's voice closed the broadcast. Pier 19N was seized. The Verdigris Union was being dismantled by federal agents. The Veil Consortium, in a stunning move, had pledged full transparency in all its port operations, effectively taking control by being the only honest player left in the game. The next morning, the sun rose on a different city. Cassian took me to the place from his dream. It was just a small, dilapidated wooden dock, jutting out into a quiet, forgotten cove, far from the industrial noise of the main port. The water was calm, and in the bright, morning light, I could hear the gentle creak and swell of the old wood. I stood at the end of the pier, the smooth gray stone he had given me in my hand. I placed it on the railing. He came to stand behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. We stood there for a long time, just breathing. "Home isn't the place that's the safest. Lila," he whispered, his voice soft in the morning air. "I know," I replied, leaning back against his chest. "It's the place you most want to return to." I turned in his arms to face him, my hands resting on his chest. "Last night, at the pier," I said, looking into his stormy, beautiful eyes, "you put your jacket on me again, but it wasn't the same. Was it?" A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "No, it wasn't." "The first time," I whispered, "you did it to hide my shame. You covered me up. But last night you did it to give me your honor." The arrests were swift. Silas Keir, Marcel Voss, and half the Port Sovereignty Commission were indicted on federal charges. Mr. Dawes, in exchange for his full testimony, was given a reduced sentence. My name, as a federally protected witness, was sealed. But the hashtag Nora started had become a city-wide legend, and true to his word. Cassian's first act as the new de facto guardian of the port was to tear down the corrupt infrastructure of Kestrel Wharf. In its place, he filed plans for a new community pier, a place for families and small boats, a place of peace. The plans were filed under the name the June Hart Pier. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let us know in the comments where you're listening from. We'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, And give us your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.